Ghost Rider, Book 9, Part 1, Scorpia Rising, Part 1, Scorpia, Chapter 3, Fly by Night, page 48. The tourist boat was moored at the Quai de Grenelle on the western edge of the city. The people who stepped on board on that bright afternoon in June most definitely were not tourists. It had been Max Grendel, the oldest founding member of SCORPIA, who had decided that they should have a floating office in Paris. This had been one of the last decisions he had made, as he had died a few months later, stung to death by scorpions in a gondola in Venice. But too much, literally, flyboat looked like any other pleasure craft gliding up and down the river. It was long and narrow, with a flat bottom and a low canopy, made almost entirely of glass to give its passengers the best possible views. Inside, however, it was very different. Inside, of rows for seating for 300 sightseers. There was a single conference table and 12 chairs. The soundproof wall separated this area from the cabin where the captain and first mate stood at the controls. The rest of the crew, 4 men in their fraternities, stayed outside on the deck. They were not allowed to look into the cabin. They stood as still as statues that lined the bridges, their eyes fixed on both banks of the river, searching for any movement that might be constructed as enemy action. Just to let you know, he's old, so I might not be that good at reading. But yeah, I'm only 8. So please don't complain to me or give me a dislike if I'm not reading good, because I'm only 8. But they stood as still statues that lined the bridges, their eyes fixed on both banks of the river, searching for any movement that might be constructed as enemy action. Grendel's idea wasn't quite as odd as it might seem. Like a building, a boat would be impossible to bug, particularly as it was kept under 24-hour guard and thoroughly swept before every meeting. Also, like a building, it could move, so anyone trying to eavesdrop what was being said would have to move too, at equal speed. As the ship was fitted with a Rustin 12 arcade diesel engine stolen from a Royal Navy River-class offshore patrol vessel that might be very fast indeed. Finally, should a police attempt to come close, there was a pointed defence weapon system based on the famous goalkeeper technology developed by the Dutch, with autocannon and advanced radar concealed beneath false panels on the foredeck. This was capable of firing 75 rounds. It was critical firing 70 rounds per second at a distance or up to 1,500 meters. Dun. Do you like those noises I made? Dun dun dun. This was capable of firing, if necessary. Scorpia was both willing and able to start a small wall in the heart of Paris. The boat was called Le Débiteur, which might be translated as someone who leaves without paying their debts. Such people used to be called fly-by-nights. As Grendel had argued, there was something very calming about discussing business while cruising past some of the most beautiful buildings in Europe. My cruising past some buildings in Europe. Business was, particularly when the business was as dangerous as theirs. Sabotage, corruption, intelligence, and assassination. These were the 4 activities that had given SCORPIA its name. It was here in Paris. It had been formed a collection of intelligence agents, and assassination. These were the 4 activities that had given Scorpia its name. It was here in Paris that it had been formed. A collection of intelligence agents from around the world who had seen that their services might no longer be needed after the end of the Cold War, and who had decided to go into business for themselves. It has been a wise move. Secret agents are generally not highly paid. The head of MI5 in England receives only £200,000 a year, a tiny amount compared with any investment banker. Every member of Scorpia had multiplied his annual income by a factor of 10, and none of them was paid any tax. There were once again 12 of them, and they were all male men. There had been a woman on the original executive board. She had been killed in London. Altogether, 6 of the founding members had died, one from natural causes. Current chief executive was Zeljan Kurse, sitting at one end of the table in charcoal grey suit, white shirt and black tie. As he had explained to Aristotle London, Scorpia had really taken on 6 new recruits. Although it had been forced to look outside the intelligence community for some of them, there was a ginger-haired Irishman who called himself Seamus, and had been a member of the IRA. Twin brothers had been brought in from the Italian mafia. Finally, there was Razum. Scorpia was on the way up. That was the message it wanted to make clear to the world. It was taking back the control it never have lost. 12 executives arrived individually and at 5-minute intervals, some in chauffeured cars, some on foot, one even on a bicycle. Only Giovanni and Eduardo Grimaldi, the twins, arrived together, but then in 25 years they had never spent a minute apart. At exactly 3 o'clock, the deckhands lifted the anchor, the captain pushed forward on the throttle, and Le Débiteur slipped out into the river, beginning its journey east towards the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame. Zeljan Kurse waited until they were on their way before he spoke. He didn't greet anyone by name. Such matters were a waste of words. Nor did he offer to anyone a drink, nor even a glass of water. None of these people trusted each other, so they would only have refused it. If he had any recollection of his narrow escape in London, he didn't show it. His eyes were heavy. He looked almost bored. Good day to you, gentlemen. He began as usual. The English language sounded peculiarly ugly coming from his lips. It had long since been agreed that English was the only language they would speak. We have come together today to agree upon our tactics for an operation which we have called Horseman, and which will earn us the sum of 40 million euros when it is successfully completed. As you all know, I have given the management of this business to Mr. Razum. Gertrude's side was, as he had expected, there was a brief flash of anger in the single eye of the Israel agent, Levi Kroll. This was the 3rd time he had been passed over for Project Command. Nobody else had noticed. Their attention was fixed on the man with the silver hair and the round circles who had been placed not by accident at the head of the table. I will add only that the first instalment of the money had been paid into our Cayman Islands, accounted by our client Ariston Xenopoulos. Has continued. We will receive the full amount on the same day the so-called Elgin Marbles lands on Greek soil. How was our son? Dr. 3 asked. He was very small, and as the years went by, he seemed to be getting smaller. He had recently completed a 2,000-page encyclopedia on the subject of torture. The writing had exhausted him, although he had enjoyed the research. He is critically ill, Curse replied. According to his doctors, he should already be dead. And if he dies before our work is complete, the money will still be paid. Curse blinked heavily as if to cut off any further discussion, but it is not just a question of money for us. He went on. This is a matter of great importance. We have endured 2 failures in a single year, unheard in our long history, and I have heard unpleasant whispers. Gentlemen, there are some governments and intelligence agencies that no longer trust us with their assignments. The purchase of nuclear material for iron, the terrorist atrocity in Tel Aviv, the collapse of the 3 banking system in Singapore. Just 3 recent operations we should have come to us, but which instead were given to other organizations. We have to prove to our clients that we are back to our full strength. This is our opportunity. The work will begin here today. We'll have echoes that will be heard throughout the world. He nodded in the direction of Razum. Please tell the board what you have planned. With great pleasure, Mr. Kirst. Razum licked his lips. Pleasure was not a word he used often. It was not an emotion that was familiar to him. And yet he had been looking forward to this moment for a long time, and he felt something close to a thrill to be the one holding the reins, to be in command of the entire executive board of Scorpia. The Elgin marbles, he muttered, his voice barely audible above the drone of the motor. The British government has refused time and again to hand them back. Why? Because they are selfish and arrogant. Questions I have been asking myself the last few months is what will make them overcome their selfishness and arrogance. What will make them change their mind? And the answer I come up with is a single word. Fear. Somehow we have to arrange matters so that they have no choice. We have to put them in a position where they must return to sculptures, where their survival depends on it. But at the same time, it has to be done very delicately. For example, if we set off a nuclear bomb, if we set off a nuclear device and threaten to set it off in the heart of London, if they did not comply with our wishes, but this would not be easy as it might even work. They might not believe us. They might, as it were, call our bluff. It is not our task to turn the British into victims, no matter how pleasant their thought. It will suit our purposes more. If they are hated, they are thieves and aggressors. They deserve the condemnation of every civilized country. Razum drew a breath. 21 eyes in the room were all turned to him. Outside, the boat was cutting through the bright water, heading towards the bend in the river, with the Eiffel Tower and the field of Mars looming up on the right. They passed underneath a bridge, the Point Diana, and a bar of shadow swept briefly across the glass ceiling. I do not believe violence or the threat of violence is the answer, Razum went on. But suppose we were to arrange a trap for them. Imagine that we were going to arrange a scandal so dark and so shocking that will destroy their reputation for decades to come. No country would do business with them. The Americans would turn their back on them. The European community already hates them, but this would be the final straw. Nobody would trust them. Suddenly, Great Britain would be a small, very small and lonely island indeed. Imagine all that, my friends. Ask yourself, what the British government would do to avoid it? Do you think they would agree to empty one room in a stupid museum in the middle of London, where they chiefly send a collection of old statues back to the rightful owners? I think they would. I really think they would. Razum longed for a cigarette. He could feel the packet pressing inside his jacket pocket. Today he was wearing European dress, but he dared not reach for it. It wasn't that smoking was forbidden. It's just that he might be considered a weakness. I have already put into operation a plan that will achieve all this, he said. It is a sort of exercise that carries unmistakable stamp and authority of SCORPIA, and from what I have been told, I think it will give everyone around this table a great deal of personal satisfaction, because gentlemen, what I have in mind involves a teenage boy. He paused for effect. The boy's name is Alex Ryder. There was a moment of perfect silence. Even the engine seemed to have stopped. The last few words seemed to have had a paralyzing effect on at least the half the people in the cabin. Alex Ryder, sitting next to Kroll, the Japanese man called Mikato, raised his thumb to his lips and bit at the nail. As he did so, he exposed the diamond set in one of his front teeth. Mikato was a member of the criminal organization known as the Yakuza, and had tattooed the names of every man he had killed across his body. Fortunately, he had run out of space. "We have encountered this boy twice," he began. We have even tried to kill him with a bullet fired into his heart. The sniper we hired had never failed. "Please hear me out," Razum interrupted. "I have given the matter a great deal of thought." Suddenly he decided to hell with it. He took out his packet of black devils and lit with one solid gold lighter. Smoke curled in front of his face, reflecting the two circles of the glasses. "I am perfectly aware that Alex Ryder has incredibly got the better of this organization on 2 occasions," he said. "It was a fairly simple affair involving the creation of a tsunami to strike the coast of Australia. And before that, the late Miss Waterman was responsible for the operation called Invisible Sword. This was a secret weapon using nanoshells with a cyanide core. The plan was to poison thousands of children in Britain. We do not need to discuss these matters." There was a Frenchman at the table, a man with a neat grey beard and the long slender fingers of a pianist. He was rolling his knuckles across the wooden surface, a sense of irritation. "But we do need to discuss them, Monsieur Duval," Razum replied. "How can you understand our one weakness if we don't examine it?" He waved her hand. "There was absolutely nothing special about the child except that he is a child. That's the only reason he has been so useful to MI6. Oh yes, he was useful training from his uncle, who was a spy himself before he was killed. But do you really think a basic knowledge of karate and the ability to speak a few foreign languages were the reason he managed to defeat you?" "That's nonsense!" I swallow one, "because you underestimated him. Winston you would have shot him when he had a chance. Miss Waterman too. Maybe they hesitated because he was so young. That was his strength. He was the world's most unlikely spy. It didn't matter if it was the island of Scantiki or Sail Enterprises in Cornwall. Nobody looked at him twice. That was their mistake." "And our mistake," Kroll began. He had been listening to all this in growling discomfort. He alone was allowing his emotions to get the better of him. Sergeant Kirsten noticed this. It was what he had expected. "Let me finish," Razum cut off. "I have done a great deal of research into this child. I managed to obtain a copy of a report prepared by a journalist last year, and I confirmed what I had already found out for myself. On at least 6 occasions, it may be more. He was employed by the Special Operations Divisions of MI6. Gentlemen, I ask you to consider the implications. Everyone at the table knows all too well that secret agents, spies, aren't really heroes. They'll do what they do often dirty and unpleasant. They kill people who have to be killed, and they do without a second thought. They have no pity and no sense of shame. That they share the sorts of secrets that nobody else wants to know. Do spies have friends? Of course not. Nobody in their right mind would want to get close to them. They cannot be trusted. So what happened if it was discovered that MI6 had recruited 14-year-old schoolboy, too young to vote, too young to smoke, or get married, but old enough to be sent to foraging countries, get mixed up with international politics, terrorism and murder? What do you say about that country's government or its secret service? Let us take it one step further. Suppose the boy was sent on a mission that went horribly wrong. This time it wasn't something brave or clever. He wasn't trying to save the world from some madman like the Mayan Clay. He wasn't protecting British children from a lethal virus hidden inside a computer. No, this time he was involved in something that the entire world would condemn. As Razum spoke, some of the men around the table were becoming more alert, nodding as they followed the thread what he was saying. And let us also imagine that during the course of this mission the boy was killed. That this brought smiles and a few murmurs of approval. Suddenly we have a situation: a 14-year-old is shot to death by police by police in the streets of a major city. There are documents in his pockets. Perhaps he is carrying a gun that can be traced back to London. All the evidence proves beyond any doubt that he was working for MI6. Think for a minute what the result of all this would be. It would all be covered up, Mikado said. There isn't a newspaper that would dare print such a story. Quite possibly. But we would have all the evidence. SCORPIA would have collected emails, phone intercepts, photographs, voice recordings. We would have in our hands a bomb that we could detonate at any time. And the result, the reputation of the British government would be destroyed. It would be forced to dismantle its own secret service. The Prime Minister would resign, and no civilized country would want to do business with Britain for decades to come. No one spoke. By now, Ledebitieu had left the Eiffel Tower behind and turned the corner past the Croix de Zoé. If anyone looked out of the window, they would have seen the gardens of the Tuileries stretching out on the left bank with the Louvre Museum just below. They would have seen couples strolling along the path between shrubs and fountains that had been arranged so perfectly, and it was as if they had been designed by a mathematician rather than a gardener. But nobody was interested in the view. They were all focused on Razum. Turning over what he had just said, let me get this straight. The man who had spoken was fair-haired, dressed casually in jeans and an open neck shirt. His name was Brendan Chase, and he had once been the paymaster for ASIS, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service. Till one afternoon, when after a drinking session, he boarded a plane with $400,000 of the agency's money stuffed into his backpack. Somehow you're going to persuade MI6 to send Alex Ryder on a mission. You're going to make sure that that mission goes wrong and the boy is killed. Well, I'm with you there. If you want to volunteer, I'll be glad to fire the bullet myself. You're then going to blackmail them. We have all the evidence. We have the photographs and the recordings. You make the public unless you persuade your government to send the original marbles back to Greece. Is that about it? You have expressed it with perfect clarity, Mr. Chase. Okay, but this is what I don't understand. How are you going to do it? These photographs, for example, are you going to forge them? That should be pretty good if you're going to stand up to examination. I don't intend to forge anything. So how are you going to get the British Secret Service to play along? Razum tapped action to the surface of the table. His fingernails were stained yellow. With nicotine and forgery it's out of the question, he continued. We have to be cleverer than that, but I believe it will be perfectly possible for us to arrange all the pieces on the board that we control the entire game. And at the moment, the gentlemen we have the upper hand. British intelligence have no idea of our intentions, And the truth is, they are a great deal less intelligent. They might believe Adam Blunt has been in charge for too long. The same is true of his deputy, Miss Jones. We have extensive files on two of them, and I have examined them closely. There are certain patterns of behaviour. That is to say that we have become predictable. It's very simple to manipulate them. We will create a trap. We will create a trap. We will create a trap. We will create a trap, and with a little nudging and pushing, they will fall right into it. Alex Ryder is 15 years old now, Mercator said. He had taken out a handkerchief and was fanning it across his face. He eyed the cigarette with this. As far as we know, MI6 is no longer using him. He really believes that you can persuade them to involve him again. Certainly! Adam drops the cigarette and ground it onto the wooden floor. All you have to do is create the circumstances that will steer them towards a decision. I had heard that he'd refused to work for them again, Dr. 3 said. Ace White never had a real choice in the matter. What's so strange is that he'd never wanted to be a spy in the first place. What this means is that if we don't actually have to go anywhere near him, provide them with the right sort of bait, MI6 will do our work for us. They're the ones we have to target. What bait do you have in mind? The Frenchman asked. Razum glanced briefly at Zeldin Cust as he was seeking his consent. The bald head nodded very slightly. It has to be done one step at a time, Razum replied. Our first objective is to get Alex Ryder out of England and into a city of our choosing. Although he won't be aware of it, he'll be entering a hall of mirrors, as if it at a fun fair. Every move he makes will be controlled. Certainly doors will be closed to him even as others open up. He'll be watched from every angle, but as I say, you have to start with MI6. They're the ones who would draw Alex into a trap. So let's begin with the bait. Let's say that a dead body is found floating in the Thames. The body is that wanted criminal, very important criminal. MI6 has been searching for him for some time, and in his pocket is a letter or some document. Of course, it's a code. MI6 send it to their best scientists. They manage to work out what it means. That is when they discover an operation is taking place in some distant country, which demands their urgent attention. It is a thing of world-changing importance. An agent must be sent there at once. It could be any agent, Mikado interrupted. Why would they choose the boy? Because the operation involves a field of activity, which a child might pass unnoticed. This is the key to the whole thing. I've already seen it in the files. First time MI6 used Alex Ryder, it's because he could pass himself off as the winner of a competition in a computer magazine, and this allowed him to infiltrate the Horowitz sales production plant in Cornwall. The next time it was Point Blanc Academy in France, which he could enter as a student, a teenage son of a multimillionaire, and travel with 2 American agents to the island of Skeleton Cape. This time, he was pretending to be their son and having him with them to turn them to an ordinary, happy family. You see, there is a pattern of a teenager is required. You have to... they have to choose Alex Ryder. There's no one else. And I paused. The Italian twins turned briefly to each other, and they knew at once they had come to the same decision. Mercato's face relaxed, and he nodded slowly. The Australian smiled to himself. Lelek e hat. Shelley. Any silent agreement in the room was shattered by a Levitt growl spitting out the vile oath in Hebrew. Now he rose to his feet, addressing everyone around the table. I do not believe what I am hearing, he roared. His face was livid, the veins on his cheeks standing out. This is madness. Listen to me. I'm not saying that this child is better than us. I do not for a minute believe that he beat us for any other reason than luck. However, let me tell you now, luck has a part to play in our activities. You can plan everything perfectly, but still small, unforeseen detail can destroy you. Chance we meet in the street, a gun jamming bad weather. You don't know that this is true. Alex wanted the luck of the devil on Judy Rothman and Niall, her second in command for that matter. Major U was a genius. He ran the most successful snakehead operation in Far East, but when it came up against Alex Ryder, he died and the snakehead fell apart. There are a dozen ways we can persuade the British to return these worthless statues. I like the idea of a nuclear bomb, but we could kidnap a member of the royal family, maybe one of the princess, and send him back one piece at a time until the government gave in to our demands. But I will not agree to take on this child for a third time. Twice is enough. We cannot risk the third humiliation. Cole sat down, breathing heavily. Is there anyone else here who shares our colleagues' concerns? Sergeant Kirst asked. Lion poker players about to reveal their hands. The 10 other members of SCORPIA eyed one another carefully, but none of them spoke. I take it from your silence, then, that you all agree with Razum's plan? But I disagree, Quoll insisted, not waiting for an answer. And by our own rules, if we are not unanimous, we do not proceed. Kirst seemed to consider this. We could be unanimous, he purred. And how might that happen, Zeljan? Quoll looked at him curiously, daring him to provide an answer. Nothing had changed, but the atmosphere inside the conference room was suddenly brittle. The sound of the engine shuddered in the air. Sergeant Kirst shrugged, his huge shoulders rising, then falling a few inches. He ignored Quoll, turning and said to Razum, You suggest that a criminal could be found floating in the Thames, he said. Might it not be more convincing if he were a member of the executive board of SCORPIA? That would be excellent, Razum replied. Forget it. Quoll was back on his feet again, and as if by magic, a gun had appeared in his hand. It was a 9mm SP-21 military pistol designed by Israel Military Industries. He couldn't possibly have drawn it from a holster. Must be a string mechanism inside his jacket. Had delivered it into his hand. He pointed at Zeljan Kirst, a wild-looking one eye. I suspected that you'd be thinking of getting rid of me, he murmured. I'm not surprised. I've given more than 20 years to this organisation and need a sort of reward. I guess same reward as Max Grendel. Nobody will try us from SCORPIA, do they? He laughed briefly. Maybe you should consider what your future you have here. The gun didn't move, but his eyes slid briefly towards the twins and then back again. You're not going to kill me, Zeljan. As you can see, I've prepared for this moment. You think SCORPIA is getting stronger? It's not. It's finished. And I'm going to be the first to walk out. Nobody reacted. He was unheard of for a gun to be produced in the middle of an executive meeting. But they were all confident. Kirst must have known he was most surely have the situation under control. You're going to order the captain to steer this boat to the nearest bank, and then I'm going to leave, Quoll continued. You don't need to worry about me. I have no interest in you anymore. If you ever come after me, I'll have a story to tell that put you all in jail for longer than you can possibly live. You understand me? Zeljan Kirst's hands were on the table. Quoll stood his right hand stretched out and pressed a button in the side of his chair. I said, you understand me? I understand you completely. Kirst replied. There was a soft tinkle of the glass breaking. A hole had appeared in the window, just behind Quoll's head. Quoll jerked slightly but remained standing. A look of puzzlement strode across his face. There was a moment's silence, then Kirst spoke. You have been shot in the back of the neck, just above the circle's curve, he explained. I'm afraid your spine has been served and you are effectively already dead. With enormous effort, as if knowing this would be the last movement he ever made, Quoll opened his mouth. His hand with the gun remained frozen. Why now? We should be passing the Paris Mint. Kirst glanced out the window. Surely enough, there was a handsome building with arches and columns stretching for some distance along the waterfront. I knew, of course, that you were carrying a gun and suspected you might be foolish enough to try and use it, so I took the precaution of placing a sniper on the roof. Can you still hear me? I would like to think you still have the consolation of knowing that your death will not be wasted. Carl's legs gave way, and he crashed down into his chair, his head and shoulders slumping forward onto the table. The hole in his neck was surprisingly small. We have to put Levy in the furniture until the time comes to use him. Curse went on. We didn't want to give away the time of his death, and whatever clue it is we'll place in his pocket, it will have to be something very ingenious. We want to make MI6 work. The more clever they think they are, the more easily they will fall into our trap. Chancellor again advised him. There's something else. Yes, like everyone in the room, was completely underestimated the murder had just been witnessed. It was as if nothing had happened at all. We can manipulate MI6 and we can ensure that Alex Ryder is brought back into service. Once he's in his hands, it will be a simple matter to kill him. Although he's smart himself, I hope you allow me a little time with him first. There's an experiment that I would like to try. Just be careful, Duval said. Of course, there was something else we need, on which I didn't have time to mention. Before our unfortunate interruption, he looked briefly at the dead man, sprawled forward over the table. I have to say that we cannot forge evidence with nothingness. Have to be creative. We live in an age of disinformation. That is to say, there isn't a document or a report that anyone trusts. People need to see things that with their own eyes. We are going to have to capture Alex Ryder on film. I was going to be able to show him live on TV before he's discovered, as it were, dead on TV. I want the whole world to be able to see him in action. And how will you manage that? Dr. C asked. Adam took out a second cigarette. Nobody was going to ask him to stop smoking. Not now. Actually, it would be very simple, he drawled. But it would require the assistance of someone very special, someone unique. Fortunately, I was able to track this person down. I've already set in a motion plan, a plan to communicate with him. He has every reason to wish harm to Alex Ryder. In fact, he hates Alex Ryder more than any of us here. I have not yet been able to speak to him about Horseman, but I can assure you that he will be delighted to help us. Although getting him to us will be expensive, I already put a team in place. It will be money well spent. At being well, he should be with us by the end of the week, and then Operation Horseman can begin. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you for listening to Chapter 3, Fly By Night, for 22 pages. Thank you, and goodbye, everyone, and thank you for listening to this.